So hello everybody, thank you for your interest in the topic that I proposed today and for taking the time to listen to me right now when I imagine you're already tired after a full day. My name is Monica, I work for Eventrix. Eventrix is a startup developing a platform for speakers and event organizers, supporting their efforts in shaping the future through knowledge sharing in conferences like this one. I have a background in computer science. After graduating university, I tried different roles in various contexts. I worked as a software tester, I worked as a customer support, and then I spent a few years working with tech startups, developing programs that accelerate their growth. I worked with How to Web, if any of you are familiar with the company. I ran the first accelerator MVP Academy, and I was part of the team that launched T.A.K.E Hub Bucharest. After working with, as an external part of the teams, I decided to get my hands dirty and help build useful products. As a product manager, I strongly believe that no good user experience can come out of bad developer experience. Thus, in my team, we pay very much attention on our day-to-day experience, and we try to improve our process and our experience as we build the product. How do we do this? I don't suggest trying the physical way, especially because it doesn't work when you have just one product owner working with multiple developers. In my case, I'm one product owner working with 3 developers. These are 2 of my colleagues, so I brought proof that they are indeed smiling. I took this picture earlier this week when they were doing a pairing session. So what is our definition and what makes my colleagues smile? They need to work with confidence on each feature and be able to focus on what they are currently doing and thus produce better quality of code. They must know exactly where the feature is ready to reach production, and this is done by involving them from the beginning of the feature definition. They also, they need to know where their code is going, so they must be sure that the feature won't change once they start actual development on it. To improve our experience, we do a lot of experiments and we use a lot of techniques besides behavior-driven development, which I will talk about in more detail today. For example, we do FICA, which is a meeting, daily meeting, informal. When this is a Swedish tradition actually, where people gather for coffee and for sometimes cookies, sometimes fruits. And this is where we informally share articles that we've written, that we've read before. We share even movies that we watched, and this helps us build a common culture, a common knowledge base. So, what I will tell you about today is I will do just a quick recap of what behavior-driven development is. And I will tell you how we involve it in our process. I will tell you the benefits that we found in it, as well as some mistakes we did. So maybe you will avoid them from the start. So what is behavior-driven development? Behavior-driven development is a process that emerged from test-driven development to bring test writing closer to human language and to provide a consistent, common vocabulary that can be understood both by analysts, by testers, developers, and business people. It gives us a framework to define multiple user scenarios for each story that is being developed. The framework is given some initial context. When an event occurs, then ensure some outcomes. Behavior-driven development consists of 3 parts. The first part is the discovery, where you have to have have conversations and to better understand the use cases. The second part is documenting these user scenarios. And the third part is automating the tests that prove that those user scenarios are met. We find great value in just implementing the two. We don't always end up automating those user scenarios. So how do we use it? I'll tell you a bit about our context. We are a startup. We have direct contact with our users. Thus, we start with a story map that gives us the big picture of the stories that we are planning to develop and that we have already developed. We take each user story from this map and we develop the user interface for it. This is done by doing user tests, understanding and making sure that what we imagine will solve a problem for our user really does that. Then we prioritize features, and once a feature reaches our ready for development column in our Kanban board, we do the behavior-driven development analysis, and only then the developers start work on it, and it gets developed and then reaches production. We do a continuous development environment, so once a feature is done, we quickly test it, and then we push it to production. We do a lot, about 2 or 3 pushes to production per week. The first, So the first 2 parts of the process are usually done by me, the product manager, and because we are a small team, I also do the user experience part. And for these three steps, we involve the developers. One thing that's important to mention here is that the developers understand the business case. We explain to them why we make the decisions that we make about how to build the features, and we encourage them to give feedback and to come up with improvement ideas. BDD wears many hats for us, as I told you. It gives us a framework to do a thorough analysis of each feature. It supports the communication in our team between the product owner and the developers. It provides us executable documentation, and it also acts as acceptance criteria, which means exactly what testing examples need to be met before a feature is ready to be pushed to production. So on our Kanban board, we have a policy that when our ready for development queue goes under 3 stories, we need to start a behavior-driven development analysis. We chose the number 3 based on our cycle time, which is between 1 and 3 days, and the number of our developers. To prepare for the BDD analysis, I, the user experience person, prepares the visual prototype, and again, this is confirmed with actual users. This prototype is sometimes a high-definition prototype. I use UXPin for that, or sometimes just a post-it explaining how the functionality should work is enough. Then, if we are doing multiple analysis for multiple user stories, we schedule a queue replenishment meeting where everyone in the team is involved. In our case, that's the product owner and the developers. If we would have a tester in the team, he would definitely be involved. And as Chris Metz mentioned earlier, maybe you participated in the European testing conference that took place here. The 3 amigos that are usually involved in such meetings can also include more people, so it's not just 3. If you have a user researcher who is relevant for the stories that you are developing, if you have UX designer or a data analyst, it's good to involve all the people that are relevant and can contribute to the better definition of that user story. What's very important is to have someone in the team who understands the framework, the behavior-driven development framework, well, facilitating the meeting. What I found out as a product owner is that sometimes during these meetings, actually most of the times, you come up with different use cases that you didn't think of beforehand. And it helps me not to be the facilitator because I'm the one who has to make decisions and do a lot of thought. So if someone else is the one who's actually writing given when then and is saying, let's think now about the outputs, it helps me a lot to be able to focus on the actual feature. So what we do during these meetings is we discuss scenarios. We start with the outputs, with what we need the system to do. We give real-life examples of how users would use that feature. And we ask a lot of what-ifs. This helps us discover more use cases than we initially thought. And it helps us discover them from the beginning, so that when the developers start the analysis while actually writing code, they don't come up with things we haven't thought of. So they don't have to stop, come, ask the product owner, what should I do in this case? And we avoid having back and forth and thus losing time and maybe damaging their code quality because they have to deal with things they didn't think of from the beginning. Then, to capture what we are talking, we sometimes just write and save scenarios. This is an example that I wrote in a Gherkin-like syntax. It's not exactly that. I don't want it to be because we don't use it to further automate it. It's just so that we captured what we talked about and that the developers have the requirements clear. Sometimes what we do is actually write on the spot functional tests, and my team does that using Ruby, Gem, and Spock. Of course, this is the case where a developer has the keyboard and captures what we talk about during the meeting in exact functional tests. One other important observation that we have is to make sure that all the resources that the developers need from the user experience person, from the product owner, are shared at the moment the meeting is over. In our case, this is the prototypes. This can be microcopy. For example, I do email templates that they further have to use. So these are all resources that are shared before the meeting is over. The benefits that we find in this way of work. First of all, BDD determines us to do a thorough feature analysis. This photo is an example of the result of a Cube replenishment meeting that we did. And you can see on the left, those are the initial stories that we started with. And each of those stories, you can see, was further broken into multiple user stories because we realized that actually it can be sliced more. We have, you can see the sort of user interface prototypes, and also these are observations about the actual implementation, because we have developers and we also have the more experienced developer who is the CTO, and sometimes we even get into details about how we will implement that. It supports team communication. It helps us clarify the requirements. It helps us discover new use cases that if I as a product owner just stand on my desk and think about use cases, I will most definitely miss some of those. And it helps us make just-in-time decisions. For example, because we're a startup and fast development, fast release of features is very valuable for us. Sometimes I will ask a developer, how much time do you think doing this way or doing it that way would take? And sometimes I just choose half of a functionality. For example, we had a functionality about sorting a table. I can choose just to sort like ascending order or both ascending and descending order. So this is something I discuss with the developer, and if it takes a lot of time, I might say sorting ascendingly is enough. This might be a pretty simple explanation, but yeah. When we do the meetings where we write directly the functional tests, developers go away with executable documentation, which is very useful. And in the case where we're just capturing the ideas, it gives them a clear acceptance criteria as well. So they know that if these use cases are met, the feature will go into production without worries. It also allows us to have more fast and more predictable delivery of features. This is a photo of some user stories that we developed and their cycle time. We kind of usually keep them below 3 development days from the moment a developer starts work on that user story until the moment they reach production. And this usually includes at least 1 day, as you can see, of staging, where it comes, I see it, I test it a bit more, and I say, yeah, I'm sure this is good enough, let's push it to production. We also have a policy that once a feature is in the development stage for more than 2 days, we stop development and we ask for help. Many times that's help pairing with another colleague, but sometimes it's a redo of analysis and maybe a slicing of the user story. Mistakes that we did. Sometimes, in the beginning especially, I wrote the BDD analysis by myself. We said, yeah, this feature looks simple enough. Here's the analysis. The developer said, yeah, it looks simple enough. Give it to me. We don't have to talk about it. And then we discovered that actually, no, it wasn't that simple. An actual example for this is when we had an edit event. I said, well, it's just like create event. It's edit event, you just have to work around the fields to make them editable. But when the developer started actual work on this, there were data that might have been introduced before by users that we had to deal with, so we had multiple use cases. If the BDD analysis shows too many outcomes, you might want to think about the fact that you should slice that story more. I have an example for this. We had a feature where we should send notifications once a new comment is posted in a chat. So we said, yeah, when you comment, just send notifications. Once the developer started working on this, we realized that we have multiple types of notifications that need to be sent with different templates, and that we should calculate who actually is relevant to receive that notification. Normally, if we discover this, ideally we discover it in the meeting where we do the analysis, and we say, yeah, it's one story just to send one notification to one person with one template, see if it works, push it to production for that case, and then move on with the others. It's important also, even if the feature doesn't have a lot of value for the user, the end user, sometimes it's just useful to get it into staging and to get the product owner's approval on how that works, and then replicate that for the other cases. It also allows us to analyze just in time. This is a red flag to analyze just in time, and I'll go back to the picture I showed you before. as I told you, this was a meeting for us to do BDD analysis on multiple user stories. The thing is that we did this before one of our colleagues, the most experienced one, was leaving into holiday. But the takeaway from this is that if you analyze too many stories ahead, you will forget what you discussed about them, because you cannot capture everything. And you have back and forth, and it happens to us particularly on these user stories, because we are working on them right now, to all three of us be looking at them and saying, what did this mean exactly? So the idea is to analyze just in time and to keep count of what your cycle time is. So that's the number of days that pass from when you start developing until you put the feature in production, and the number of developers you have, so basically how fast you are developing each feature. Don't worry, you will still miss things. Even doing this doesn't guarantee that you won't have back and forth. The idea is not to assign blame. Don't look at the product owner and say you didn't do a thorough analysis, and don't look at some particular developer and say, well, you should have thought about this. The idea is to communicate fast, so when you as a developer discover there's a new case, you should run to your product owner, and the structure of the team should allow the product owner to dedicate time as quickly as possible to make a decision about that use case and how to treat the new situation, and get back to work as quickly as possible. These are the topics that I prepared for today. I'd like to do Q&A now, and if you are using behavior-driven development in your team, I think it would be very interesting to share your experience with that. The process that I described is what works for us and what works for us in the current state of our team. We have changed it across time. We discovered that actually in the beginning we only did product owner plus one developer meetings for analysis. When we had more people that stopped working because it was too much time on the product owner and too many interruptions from the other types of activities that I did. So we started doing the meetings together with everyone in the team. This works for us because we are quite a small team, I guess, and it might not work in other environments. The idea is to experiment, evaluate how things work, and do retrospectives to understand what could improve your process, and find the best recipe for you.